Arwa Damon, and the award-winning journalist who's covered this region for so long and has helped us with our coverage now for so many weeks. You've been quite critical in your analysis of Israel, and especially the way they're handling themselves around these hospitals. So with the latest news that's in, what's your view on it?
Yes, I have been critical because I do know war very well. I do know the dynamics that exist in similar war zones. And I also do know that the amount of pain and suffering that is being inflicted on the Palestinian people could have been avoided. When we're talking about those babies that were supposed to be in these incubators, I mean, logic would say that evacuating them should have been among the top priorities, that it should not have taken this long. And sadly, what we do now know is that it appears as if 5 of them did not survive. On top of all of that, there's also now this big question of where are all of their parents? As far as what is being reported, only 4 mothers actually left with those babies. Where are the rest of their parents? At this stage, the information is so sparse that people don't even really know if their parents are still alive or not. The clashes that are taking place around the hospitals. Look, this is very tricky terrain. I fully understand and appreciate that when a military force is approaching a hospital, that they do need to proceed with caution. What we are seeing, however, based on reports that we're getting from the ground, is that that level of caution, whether it is being applied to hospitals or other locations where civilians are supposed to be safe, is not necessarily being applied, because aside from these various different clashes that are taking place around the hospitals, aside from the clashes that took place in and around the Indonesian hospital, we also have now once again a UN school that should have been safe shelter for civilians again being hit. So yes, it
Right.
does call into questions exactly what steps is Israel really taking to try to keep the civilian
Yeah,
population safe.
I want to talk about that and some of the alternatives that may or may not have been available to the Israeli military. For, as you say, you've seen these wars fought in the past. What could they have done differently? In the meantime, let me put a statement up from the IDF about the particular situation at Indonesian hospital and that strike that killed 12. We talked about it yesterday. Overnight, terrorists opened fire within the Indonesian hospital in Gaza toward IDF troops operating outside of the hospital. In response, IDF troops directly targeted the specific source of enemy fire. No shells were fired towards the hospital. That's their side of it. What would you say, in a larger sense? Because when we have discussions with people who support Israel's actions within Gaza, a lot of times I'll hear something like, what did they expect? What did they think we should have done after the 7th of October? They have a military operation underneath these places. They're using civilians as human shields. That's why they're showing us, I suppose, all these videos the last number of days of the tunnels and what have you. What do you say to those types of assertions from people who support what the IDF's doing?
Look, there is a known in this battle zone, right? One is that it is very heavily, densely populated. Two, yes, Hamas does fire rockets from civilian areas, and that, yes, there is this massive tunnel complex underneath that runs underneath all of Gaza. That is one reality. The way that, militarily speaking, that reality is addressed is what is being called into question here. And if we look at Israel's steps from the very beginning, the very first thing that Israel did was not to actually fire a strike into Gaza. One of the very first things that Israel did was to deliberately cut off all access to humanitarian assistance, to cut off electricity, to cut off fuel, and to try to bring from the very, very beginning Gaza on its knees. And I specifically say Gaza on its knees because that strategy does not differentiate between a Hamas fighter and the civilian population. In addition, there are a number of different ways that could and should have been employed to clear the civilian population out of certain areas that the Israelis wanted to target. When one wants to militarily go after a target like a hospital, knowing that there are patients and civilians who are sheltering inside, then that safe passage needs to be guaranteed well in advance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about guaranteeing safe passage, it's about guaranteeing a location for civilians, patients, and medical staff to be able to evacuate to. And what we have seen on the Israeli side when it comes specifically to that point can at best be described as a half-hearted effort. And the other additional bit of information is that even when civilians have evacuated to areas following the Israeli directive,
Right.
they have been targeted there as well. Look, I've been on embeds with the US military countless times when they have come under fire from locations like mosques, like civilian buildings, and I've seen them on a number of instances, hold fire until they were able to determine who, in terms of civilians, would actually be inside. There's also a very different calculus that a military makes when, for example, going after a target where they believe that there are potentially dozens of fighters versus a couple of gunmen who are firing pot shots. Look, I'm not on the ground. I'm not embedded right now with the IDF.
Right.
It's very hard to talk the exact specifics of what they're coming up against. But very few people would argue that this level of pain being caused to the civilian population is the only option, because it's not.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.